Have you ever stopped to think about how global power is really shifting these days, especially, when technology like AI gets mixed in? We're going beyond just the headlines today. We're doing a deep dive into that recent BRICS Summit, the one held down in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. And our mission here is to unpack just how much ground they actually covered. It was, frankly, a surprising amount, from like cutting edge AI rules all the way to big shifts in global diplomacy.
And it's important to remember what BRICS actually is. Originally Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. But now they've added several new members. Their collective voice, well, it's getting louder, definitely. But more than that, it's becoming this increasingly significant force, maybe even hinting at a new kind of global order.
That's a really interesting frame. And okay, the first thing that really leaped out, for me anyway, from the summit coverage was the BRICS leaders talking tough on AI. They're calling quite strongly for protections against unauthorized AI use. The core demands seem to be like stop scooping up excessive data and, crucially, set up ways to pay fairly when data is used for training AI. That's not a minor point, is it?
No, not at all. It's pretty fundamental. And the context here is key. For a long time now, the big tech companies, mostly based in, well, wealthier countries, they've largely pushed back against paying copyright fees for all the material they use to train their AI models. So this BRICS stance, it's more than just copyright. It's really a challenge to the whole techno-economic setup. They're sort of pushing for a new idea of digital sovereignty, maybe looking at things like collective licensing or even data trusts to make sure value gets back to creators. This could seriously reshape things.
So thinking about what that means for us, for our data, for creators everywhere, it's a pretty bold signal. It suggests maybe a future where the rules of the road online could look quite different, with this powerful bloc pushing for, well, fairer terms. But this summit wasn't just about tech. The leaders in Rio, they also made some big statements on broader geopolitics, right? They condemned the attacks on Gaza and Iran, and they were very clear about wanting reforms in global institutions.
Yeah, and if you connect those dots, you can see how the bloc is actively trying to position itself, maybe as a haven for multilateral diplomacy, is how some might put it. Especially now, right, with all the conflict and trade tensions we're seeing, there's this feeling, this perception that the established groups like the G7, the big industrial nations, or even the G20, that they're kind of, well, hamstrung by their own divisions, and of course impacted by the whole disruptive America First thing under President Trump. BRICS seems to see a gap, maybe a vacuum, left by these groups, and they're stepping into it. It's not just filling a space, though. It feels like they're trying to redefine multilateralism itself, offering a different model, maybe more focus on non-alignment economic ties rather than old security alliances. It could really be the start of a more multipolar world.
And President Lula of Brazil, he really hammered this home. He drew that powerful parallel, didn't he, to the non-aligned movement, which, for anyone maybe less familiar, that was the group of nations back in the Cold War trying to stay independent from the big power blocs. Lula actually said, quote, BRICS is the heir to the non-aligned movement. And he added that warning, with multilateralism under attack, our autonomy is in check once again. What does that historical callback really tell us about what BRICS wants today?
Well, I think it signals a very strong desire for strategic autonomy. Lula's tapping into that legacy of self-determination.
Wow.
He's suggesting BRICS isn't just about economics. It's a political counterweight. They don't want their nations just stuck between the existing powers. They want to be shaping things, global rules, economic flows on their own terms. It's a declaration of independence, really, and a rejection of a single dominant power world.
And when you look at the sheer size of this group now, that ambition seems, well, pretty grounded. President Lula shared some staggering numbers. BRICS nations, he said, now represent more than half the world's population. Just think about that. And 40% of its economic output.
Yeah.
It's almost hard to grasp the scale, isn't it? That's not just some regional club anymore. That's a major global player, and one that's growing really fast.
Absolutely. And just to trace that growth, it started back in 2009, Brazil, Russia, India, China. Then South Africa joined. But last year was the big one. That's when Egypt, Ethiopia, Indonesia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE all came in. And the summit in Rio, that was actually the first time Indonesia participated as a full member. So it marks a new, much bigger phase for them.
And it seems like others want in, too. Reports say over 30 nations are interested, either as full members or maybe partners. That definitely signals something, doesn't it? Growing influence, growing appeal, maybe because they really do offer that different model we were talking about.
But, that rapid growth, it also brings challenges. It is a really important question, I think, about the future. What are the shared goals going to be for this increasingly diverse BRICS group? You've now got regional rivals like Iran and Saudi Arabia sitting at the same table. Countries with very different economies, different political systems. Can a group that varied really stick together? Or will those internal differences eventually, cause problems? A huge management challenge, coordinating all those interests.
Yeah, and you could sort of see some of those dynamics maybe playing out at the summit itself, like Chinese President Xi Jinping sending his premier instead of attending himself, and President Putin from Russia attending online, obviously because of that international criminal court arrest warrant situation, which limits where he can travel. But you still had key figures there, right? Like India's Prime Minister Modi, South Africa's President Ramaphosa, all gathered there in Rio's Museum of Modern Art. Given that internal complexity you mentioned, how do you think those potential rivalries, like, say, the India-China border issues or Iran and Saudi Arabia's history, how might that affect BRICS actually acting together on, diplomacy or economic stuff going forward?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? They have shown they can find common ground on certain things, global finance reform, AI rules like we discussed. But the real test is going to be navigating those built-in rivalries. Getting everyone to agree might get harder, especially on really sensitive geopolitical stuff. So it suggests that while BRICS can project, a powerful united voice on some issues, their internal disagreements might limit how much they can do together in other areas, the more contentious ones. It's a constant balancing act, I suppose.
Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive then, it feels like the Rio Summit really highlighted this fascinating, almost dual focus for BRICS. On one hand, tackling the absolute frontier of AI regulation, and on the other, simultaneously trying to redefine their own place in global diplomacy. They're really asserting themselves in this changing world.
Exactly. And it leaves us with a big thought, doesn't it, for you, the listener, to consider. With BRICS expanding so fast, with such an ambitious agenda, what challenges, what opportunities do you see coming from a world where these older established powers are being, increasingly challenged by these new and evolving blocs? And how might all this reshape that tricky balance between, say, pushing technological innovation forward and maintaining some kind of global governance? Definitely something profound to think about.